it often seems as though we are ramming at one another, trying to have our own view imposed on everyone else, and we're seeking to be proved right,
yes,
as opposed to leaving yourself open to have your mind changed.
Yes.
I mean, does anybody do that?
Very rarely, and it's Socrates started this. Socrates, founder of the Western rational tradition. And people who came to Socrates to engage in dialogue, he was the one who invented this form, usually thought that they knew what they were talking about. But after half an hour of his relentless questioning, they discovered that they didn't know the first thing about goodness or justice or compassion. However ruthlessly they reasoned, however stringently logical they were, something always eluded them. And the Socratic dialogue, as just recounted by Plato, always ends with people saying, "Oh, I don't know anything." And at that point, Socrates said, "You've become wise. You've become a philosopher." On the last day of his life, Plato says, he said he was wise only in one respect, that he knew nothing. There is a profound sense of that yet we are so omniscient. The way we speak about one another, about colleagues or relatives. "Oh, well, the trouble with him is," or, "she is always doing that." Well, why she's as she is. We haven't a clue. There are things about each one of us that we don't know. How much do you really know about the colleague sitting opposite you? How much do you know of his or her private pains, what wakes her up in the middle of the night, what secret sadness she has? And then we do this with whole cultures. We omnisciently discourse on whole religious traditions and cultures based on, or races, on half-remembered op-ed piece here or a television program, and off we go. Now, the Taoists used to say that when you engage, when you mustn't identify too strongly with your opinions, because this is ego. We identify with them so strongly, they become part of us. Whereas Socrates said, open your mind, listen to the other person. And now we're very talkative in our society, but listening is not our forte. And you can sometimes see in a panel discussion that while one person is talking, the others are not really listening with open ears and minds and hearts. They're really thinking up the next brilliant remark that they're going to make. So there's no change of mind. Nobody goes into a discussion with a change of mind. Now, we are in a really perilous situation at the moment. So many of the things that we thought we knew, were certain about, have proved to have feet of clay. Our financial institutions suddenly took a real jolt. Our international policies, whatever you may think about them, clearly are not working very well. We're facing huge environmental catastrophe. We don't know how to deal with that. We need to empty our mind. Taoists have a phrase called the art of forgetting. To forget what you think you know, to be open to something fresh. There's no point, Socrates said, in going into dialogue if you're not prepared to be changed by the encounter.
And yet that's so dramatically different
yes.
from what we see all around us.
Yes, and it's the cause of many of our problems, because instead of engaging in real open-hearted dialogue with other peoples, as well as with our colleagues, to find solutions, dialogue really means bludgeoning your opponent to accept his point of view. You've got to come round to what I think.
Yes, yes.
Or we can't do any business with you unless you adopt this particular political system. There's no respect for different dynamisms or knowledge of the complexities of what we're up against.
But this idea of not identifying too strongly with your own opinions, with what you think you know, does that leave room for a really impassioned view of something? You know, can you take us through that a bit? Because it sounds as though great minds are advocating as laid back a position as possible, which wouldn't admit for a kind of impassioned fighting for a cause and for a belief.
Oh yes, you have to fight for a cause and what you believe is right, but always be prepared to change your mind as things continue, because the system unfolds as you get deeper into things. New light appears. And, you know, like a project like the Charter for Compassion, I started off with one idea and then things happen and you have to respond to those things. Otherwise you get stuck. But I think the whole search for truth is passionate. Socrates, for the Greeks, for Socrates, for Plato, for Aristotle, knowledge was a very passionate thing. It was a fervid love affair. You're seeking truth. And that means you're ready, like the hero, to go out on a limb, to leave the old securities behind and encounter, fight your demons, because you have, as you're struggling and exploring, you have many difficulties to fight within yourself. There's a temptation always to cling to the old status quo. But always just to keep your mind open to fresh insight. But when you are passionate about it and standing up for what is right, it does no good at all to speak with spite and anger. You can be passionate about injustice, absolutely, and seek to do whatever you can to end it, but to speak, as this is Gandhi here, yes, saying, not me, to speak with hatred will simply exacerbate the situation and make everything worse.
You bring a great deal of compassion to your writing about fundamentalism, wherever it appears in the world spectrum. And here's the challenge you put to people. If you were to regard fundamentalist rhetoric, look at it, read it, look at it in the way you would look at a poem and try to figure out what drives it, what's behind it, what is it built on. I mean, it almost feels like this tremendous amount of love you're bringing to statements that many people could find abhorrent. And what do you think people would find if they read fundamentalist rhetoric, which they may or may not believe in, if they regarded that the same way they tried to read a poem? What would they find?
Fear. Every single fundamentalist movement that I studied for my book, The Battle for God, in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is rooted in a profound fear of annihilation. And you know, that may sound neurotic, but let's take one example. In Judaism, fundamentalism takes 2 steps forward, one after the Nazi Holocaust, one after the 1973 War of Yom Kippur, when Israel suddenly feels alone and isolated in the Middle East. Fear. Every single fundamentalist movement that I've studied in those 3 faiths has started with what is perceived to be an assault by the liberal or secular establishment. And when people feel that their backs are to the wall, that's when they become aggressive. And in the process, they often distort the very tradition they're trying to defend. Now, I'm going to Pakistan next month, on the 1st of February. And all day people have been emailing me from London saying, don't go, etc. And I've been speaking to the people, of course, on the ground who are in Pakistan, who say, look, come, and, you know, it's not as you're being told in the newspaper. Now, we've seen this horrible business with the governor of Punjab.